So the next tool that we're going to discuss within Video Shadow is the YouTube Keyword Detective tool. And this is a really interesting one. And I really want you to pay attention to the semantic difference between what we find in this tool versus what we found in the Google tool and what it tells you about YouTube and those users. So the tool itself is super simple to use. Just go ahead and launch it from the YouTube Keyword Detective tool button, and then I'm going to go ahead and stick with the same term that we used in the last video. I'm going to pick fly fishing, and I'm going to select the top 50 just for the purposes of this search. So I go ahead and I click start, and it's going to give me the top 50 searches from YouTube. So we're starting with the parent term of fly fishing. You can see all the derivatives that it pulls from here. We get both broad, phrase match, and exact match returns. Broad being if somebody types in fly fishing in Alaska, then that term gets counted. If they type in fishing with flies, it gets counted. A phrase match meaning that these two words have to show up in a line together right next to each other. And then an exact match meaning that only somebody could type in fly fishing alone. This is a really important thing for us to note, because like I had mentioned before, when I'm looking in normal Google keyword tools, I will almost always stick with just the exact match alone. You can see the difference in searches going from 50,000 on broad to 46,000 on phrase to only 8,500 on exact. And that's just because the broad includes the fly fishing trout, fly fishing lessons, casting, knots. All of those are included when we look in broad match. And when we're looking at exact match, that only includes this one term alone. Okay, now with that being said, let's see what this data tells us and what this data is in terms of a YouTube user versus a normal Google search user. So to help illustrate this, I pulled up the same exact term looking at Google. Now this is Google AdWords data. We looked at this in the previous video, but I did the same search. I did it on exact match. Now on exact match in normal Google search, we see that there's 50,000 searches a month and 27,000 searches in North America alone, okay? That's a ton more than what we're seeing on YouTube. YouTube's only telling us 8,500, which makes perfect sense. But what I also want you to see is the keyword ideas that come from this tool. Now, in normal Google search, or if you're optimizing for AdWords or for just building out a website about fly fishing, this is perfect for you. This makes perfect sense. You see fly fishing in all iterations of the term fly fishing and how often they get searched. So fly fishing being my root term, look at the related terms that come up. Equipment, gear, rods, pictures, videos, reels, waders, right? Those make perfect sense, and that's exactly what I would expect to get from this tool. But now look at what we get from YouTube. Now what we get from YouTube is a lot different, but look at the ones that get searches, okay? That's more important. So I'm going to sort by exact, highest to lowest. Now fishing gets a ton, which makes perfect sense. Still fly, fishing bloopers, fishing videos, fly fishing, Spanish fly, which has nothing to do with this, trout fishing, and then we start to see things like fly fishing casting. Gets a ton of searches, right? In Google, no searches here, not in YouTube. Fly fishing Colorado, lots of searches in Google, no searches here. Dry fly fishing, searches in Google, no searches here. Then you see fly fishing trout. We're starting to see some stuff come up. So not all searches are going to result in terms that are searched actively on YouTube, right? It's just not nearly as common to see the same exact pattern. And the related terms that we see showing up aren't necessarily going to be anywhere close to the related terms that we see showing up for Google. Because Google's just looking at relationships, right? You search fly fishing, you also may have searched fly fishing knots. Now the YouTube data, this is just output, right? It's the same kind of pattern. You're looking at the same thing, but what people search is a lot different here. So you have to note that what we found in version 1 or video 1 of this tool using Google's keyword tool has to be checked against what we find in this tool, the YouTube tool. So I take my keywords from video 1, the Google keyword detective, and I match them against the YouTube keyword detective to see if they get searches. Now if I have one that gets searches, like fly fishing as an example again, I'll look at the data, 8,500 a month on exact, and I'll decide whether or not that's something I want to go after or get more information from. Now you can take this data, say I want to take all of these ones that actually do get searches and capture them. I can copy it, I can right click, I can copy them to a keyboard, or I can export them as a text file, or I can select the entire group, copy them to a keyboard, or copy them to the clipboard, and export that group. Now what's also interesting, as we could see from the previous video, we can also check to see if videos are on page 1. This is doing the same exact thing. It's going video by video and saying, if somebody searches for fly fishing, does that show up in Google search? And if it does, give me a yes or give me a no. So I'll let this check this, and then once it does that, I'll come back and we'll talk about what we found. Now the other interesting thing that you can do with this tool is start to build out a larger, broader keyword list for YouTube. So if you want to go through and start to look at appending terms in front of and behind, so if you start to think about the mindset of a YouTube searcher, what if I added in front of all these, learn? Then I build out a whole nother set of keywords that I can go through and I can check. What if I also built out another phrase that ended with video? So now I built out an entire different data set. I started with 50 keywords. Here's another 50 keywords to go back through and check. If I just use learn at the beginning, that's another 50 there. If I just add video to the end, that's another 50 there. So now I have, with my initial one keyword of fly fishing, I built it out to 150 keywords to go through and check against using this tool, which takes me almost no time at all. So this allows me to get different iterations of my term and get information from them very, very rapidly to determine what makes sense to go after in YouTube versus using this Google keyword tool, which tells me some information about Google search, but it doesn't really give me any information specific to YouTube. It just gives me a starting point, okay? So now that I had the terms from the first tool, the Google keyword tool, to tell me if it's showing up on page 1, I can use that, move it to this tool. Is it getting searched in YouTube? If I check those two boxes, then I move it on to the next step.